So we're on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis, and we're trying to reconcile Rabbi Yitzchak, with our Mishnah. Ula has these cases in which the Motzi Aveda takes a shvua, and the Mishnah says Mishum Tikkun Olam Motzi Aveda is exonerated from a shvuas model mitzvahs. The Gemara answers, Udi Omar, Rabbi Yitzchak holds like Ki Rabbi Eliezer ben Azar ben Yaakov. Now, what is the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov? Normally, a loser who lost an object has a tainus shema. But there are cases in which the loser has a tainus bari. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is of the opinion that although our Mishnah says that as a universal rule, without exception, a Meshav Aveda is exonerated from a shvua, meaning even in event that the Ma'abed has a tainus bari, says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, I disagree with the Chachamim, with the Tanakama of our Mishnah. When do we apply the principle of Meshav Aveda Potter Mishvur? That's only if the taina is a tainus shema. But if Lu Yitzur, the taina of the Ma'abed, is a tainus bari, then Enochinami, the Meshav Aveda will have to take a shvur. The Sanya Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Pa'amim Shodem Nishba al tainus atzma. We have a scenario in which a person takes a shvur based on his own statement in Bezdin, even though there's no tfiyah against him. Ketzad, Monol avicha biyadcha, your late father had a mana biyadi in my hands, meaning I owe him a mana. Ve'chalti pras, but I already paid back half of that amount. So out of a mana, which is 100 zuz, I paid back 50. Says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, I raise a nishba. Based on tainus atzmo, he himself admits that he's a modem mixed taina. He'll take a shvur on the other 50. V'zeu shenishbal tainus atzmo. And here's the situation, says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, even without a taina, he takes the shvur. We have halacha Meshav Aveda. He's coming forward and saying to the ben who has no knowledge whatsoever that I owe your father 50. And even though he claims that he admits that there was 100 of the chok, but he paid back 50, he doesn't take a shvu. He's a Meshav Aveda. There's no tfiyah against him. If there's no tfiyah against him, then he's a Meshav Aveda, and he's potter. But yet, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, in this same scenario, says that he takes a shvu as modem miktas. Now, the Gemara later on is going to point out that even Amoraim in a different Masechta had a whole diun, a whole dissection of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And they came to the conclusion that there's no possibility to say that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds that a Meshav Aveda is chayav shvua, even if there's no taina, no tvi against him. Certainly, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would agree it's partial that you can't impose a chiyuv shvua on a person that doesn't have a tvi against him. He's a Meshav Aveda, the Tikkun Olam applies. And therefore, we're going to reinterpret Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. That's what we're going to do right now. Okay, and this is based on a Sugya Masechta Shvuas on Daf Mem Beis. And the Gemara in Shvuas doesn't quote Rabbi Yitzchak at all, but asks the Kasha, how does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov square with the Mishnah and the Tikkun Olam of Meshav Aveda? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Leslie Meshav Aveda, Potter. So therefore, the Gemara is going to try to reinterpret Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. This is already accomplished in that Sugya in Shvuas. That certainly Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov agrees fundamentally that Meshav Aveda is potter min hashvua b'nei tikkun olam. And they said, Omer Rav b'toano katan. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, when he's machayev a shvua on this case of Helchaltiv Pras, Monol Avicha Biyadi, is talking about a case with a ben who's a katan, was Tovea, this man, And he said, my father told me before he died that you owe him that amount of money. And the Lova admits that he did borrow the money, but he claims that he paid back half of the money, 50 out of 100. So why does the Lova in this case take a shvua of Moed Miktsas? That's because there's a tainas katan. Now, why does Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov call it a tainas atzmo? And the answer is because a katan is not really cannot really produce or generate a taina in legal terms. And a taina also has to be a tainas bari. Now, the child doesn't really know whether or not this man owes him, as the heir of his father, money. He doesn't have a really tainas bari. He's just saying that, he knows that his father told him that so-and-so owes him money. That's not a real tainas bari. Tainas bari is something that you know on your own, but if you're relying on someone else's statement, that's not a real tainas bari. So now we have another problem. Forget about the fact that it's not a tainas bari in the full sense, because the katan is only basing himself on what he heard from his father. But moreover, katan doesn't have a taina at all. So how can you tell me that Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov would hold that the Lova has to take a shvua of Moed Miktsas in this case? Moed Miktsas is a shvua that you take against the taina. There is no taina here. The Tanan, the Mishnah says in Shvuas, Adaf Lamed Chesam and Beis, that a katan is not capable of a taina, and any chiyuv shvua is based on a taina. And let's just mention that there are three chiyuvei shvua, three categories of a chiyuv shvua that the Torah recognizes. One is Moed Miktsas. Number two is shvuas hashomrim, and number three is Eid Echad. Now, what happens if an Eid Echad comes into Bezdin and he says that Shimon owes Ruvain $100, and Ruvain doesn't know anything about it? So Ruvain is not capable of a taina. Can he rely on the Eid Echad, and that itself makes his taina into a taina? And that's a gigantic issue. But in any event, if the katan is putting forth a taina, a katan is not capable of a taina. Einish barnal tainas katan. My answer is my katan gadol. Yeah, what do you mean gadol? It says katan. My korele katan dilagabi mili di aviv katan. So the problem here is not a tainas katan, because the taina is a tainas gadol. The problem is that he doesn't have any first-hand knowledge in putting forth this taina against the Lova. He's only basing himself relying on his father. And that's not a full-fledged taina. In fact, the entire entity of a shvuas Moed Miktsas, as we'll soon see, is based on the fact that the Lova doesn't want to be makrish a taina. That's called Eino the Meis Panav Fnei Bal Chov. But here, the Lova is not inhibited to be makrish a taina when it's Lagabi Mili Diavid. What do you know about your father's business transactions? Okay, he told you that I borrowed money from him, but do you know whether I paid it back or not? How would you know such a thing? So therefore, there's no inhibition on the part of the Lova, the nitba, to be makish the taina of the gadol, who is basing himself on his father's words, because the Lova, in this case, the nitba, has no compulsion, has inhibition to be machish the taina. So therefore, there's no chiyuv shvua. Yehochi tainas atzmo tainas acherim. If, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, since the gadol is claiming based on what he heard from his father, and that's enough to generate a chiyuv shvua on the Lova, the nitba bidin Moed Miktsas, then why does Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov formulate this as a nishbal tainas atzma? Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is talking about a case where he's nishbal pi taina of the gadol basing his taina on his father's statement. And where it says tainas acherim vodas atzmo. Yeah, there is a tainas acherim, but the chiyuv shvua is a result of the vodas atzmo, meaning that the lova admits that he owes 50. He's only denying the other 50. So therefore, that's called tainas acherim vodas atzmo. So we ask the following question. That is exactly what Moda Mixes is about. Every case of Moda Mixes fits this exact precise definition. It's a tainas acherim and odas atzma. And the Chachamim don't agree. I mean, so I don't disagree that in the case of tainas acherim odas atzma, there's a chiyuv shvuas Moda Mixes. So they could not pater him from a shvua in that case. And also, what does Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov mean when he says pa'amin sha'adam nishma, etc., etc.? What do you mean pa'amin? This is the classic, well-trodden case of Moda Mixas. It's tainas acherim odas atzma. Ella says the Gemara. Let's go back to the original interpretation of, I think it was Rav. Let me just double check that. Amarav b'to'ano katan. So we're talking about a case where the katan is being tovea him on a pikadon shehifkid etzla, and the nitba is moda v'miktas. Now, in the parsha of pikadon, the Torah says ki yitein ish al re'eu kesav okelim lishmar. In Parshas Mishpatim, we have the Parsha of Mishpatim, and the Torah opens up the Parsha Pikado with the word Ish, Ki Yitein Ish. And the Gemara Bava Kama Daf Kufav darshans Ish v'lo katan. So that's a case of Pikado. But now our case of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is a case of Milveh. And this Ben Katan, who is the son of the Malveh, is demanding payment on a chov that this lova is chayav to his father, and even the nit by the lova is moda b'miktsas. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov holds that there is a shvua, and the Chachamim hold that even in the case of a tainis b'no hagadol, there's no shvua. And this all comes back to the principle of Eino the Meiz Ponim Tebachov the Rabba Kamifli, Toma Rabba. Mifnei Ma'amra Torah Modum Mixatayni Shava. If he's denying half, so he's a kofra kol on the half. So why do you impose a shvua on him? He's really a kofra kol. And the Gemara answers Chazok Eino the Meiz Ponim Mifnei Balchova. Which means the following. That if a person is kofra kol, let's say you claim I owe you 100 and I say I don't owe you a dime, then how could I say that to you when I borrowed money from you? The very fact that I'm saying that ha'azas panim indicates that I'm telling the truth. And therefore there's no need in the case of kofra kol to be machayvim in a shvua. But in the case of moda b'miktsas, hay b'kulei boil michbrele, it could be that the lova really wants to deny the whole chov. So therefore, by being moda on miktas, he's no longer a meiz panov, and he feels very comfortable about it. And now he's really lying through his teeth when he says that he doesn't owe the other half. Because the reason why there's no shvua in kofra kol is because of Eino the Meiz, but here this person is Meiz. And that's what the Gemara says, Bekulei boy deludile. Really, because of Eino the Meiz, he should have admitted the entire sum. Why isn't he moda on the entire sum? Right now he doesn't have the money to pay. Sovar adavi lizuze or pretty lay. You know what? I'll pay him back the other 50 when I get money. But the Torah is not going to rely on him. Oh, he's in his mind, he's saying, I'm going to pay you back when I get the money. And therefore he justifies the fact that he denies the other 50. We want to pump out of him a hodah, the entire 100. And how are we going to do so? By imposing a shvuah. He's going to be afraid to take the shvuah, and he's going to confess that he owes the other 50, the balance of which he denied, and he'll come to admit it in order to avoid the shvuah. He's basically a straight guy. He doesn't want to take a shvuah sheker. He's only got this ishtamuti kamishtamit svara. Oh, I'll justify it. I'll deny it now, but I'll pay it later on when I have the money. But he won't take a shvuah sheker. And that's the whole sugya in Babatziyah Davav, where the chasher amamona chasher ashvuasa, lo chasher ashvuasa, and we're holding lo chasher ashvuasa. So all this is based on Eino the Meiz Panav Fnei Balchova, which doesn't apply in the case of Modav Miktas because Ishtamuti Kamishtam. So the Torah requires a shvuah shvuas Modav Miktas according to Rabbah, when the nitba is not meiz, he doesn't have that ha'azis panim that chutz to be kofar hakol. So Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Sova loshna bo loshna bibno eino meiz. The logic of Rabbah in justifying the need for shvuas modav miktas applies even in the case of bno. Why? Because a person would not be meiz even in the case where the ben of the malva is demanding payment. Hilkoch lav meishav avedahu, and therefore he's chayav shvuah. Rabbanan Sabri, they hold no. A person is a lova is not meiz panav in front of the malva himself who did him out. Aval b'bno meiz, he's quite comfortable to be meiz panav. Umida lo meiz is meishav avedahu potem min hashvuah. Since he was in Kofar HaKol, just 1 second, let me just get the cheshbon again. Right, according to the Chacham, since Rabbah explains that the only reason why we are imposing a shvuah of modav miktas is because of ein adam meiz. But if there's no principle of ein adam meiz, and he's perfectly comfortable to be kofar kol, then he's basically a meishav aveda. He could have been kofar kol, no sweat. Why? Because there's no halazis panim. So the entire basis of the shvuas modav miktas is because he's inhibited to be meiz pana. And that's why he admitted half of it, but really he owes the whole thing. But if he would not be inhibited whatsoever, there's no houses upon him, then the very fact that he's modav b'miktas makes him into a meishav aveda. He could have equally and easily, without any sweat, being kofar hakol. So therefore he's a meishav aveda, he's part of it shvuah. So it comes out now that the din of Rabbi Yitzchak is similar to the din of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. And just like in the case of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, even though the toveh is a katan, and his tefiyah is not a tefiyas vadai, he's a katan. Nevertheless, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says he's chayav shvuah. Is so too in the case of Rabbi Yitzchak, where there were 2 kisim, there were 2 wallets, and the ma'abed has a tainis bari, that because we don't usually separate between the 2 purses. And there's a hodah of the motzi that he did find the kiss, but he claims he only found kiss. Is Rabbi Yitzchak says he's chayav shvuah because the p'tur of meishav aveda of a shvuah does not apply if the toveh has a tainas shema, and then we apply the tikkun olah. And that leads us to the Mishnah on Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph, which Amir Tzashem Neder will be ready for tomorrow. Wishing you a good day, and we should be zocher to the Hasidic interpretation of the 3 weeks of Bein HaMetzarim. Pasuk says, Rodfu Bein Kol Rodfeha Bein HaMetzarim. Yeah, but the Rodfeha means those who are looking for HaKadosh Baruch. Ken Yiratzon. Amen. Shpi Masig HaKadosh Baruch Hu.